Alaine Moretti moved through her skyscraper like a storm disguised as a woman. Her heels struck marble with cold precision, and every employee who heard them instantly found something urgent to stare at. Screens, carpets, the ceiling, anything but her eyes. No one dared breathe when she passed. Power didn't just follow her, it bowed. But that morning something was wrong. Her assistant hurried after her, voice trembling. "Ma'am, the board needs you, it's bad." Alaine didn't stop walking. She never stopped. "Everything is bad. Use a stronger word." She pushed open the glass doors to her executive command room and froze. Her empire, her meticulously built, ruthlessly guarded, globally feared empire, was collapsing line by line on the digital wall. Accounts draining, systems locked, entire branches shutting down like lights dying one after another. For the first time in 10 years, her voice didn't sound like steel. "Who did this?" Silence. Not one expert, not one analyst dared to answer. Alaine inhaled sharply, the sound almost fragile. "Find me the best tech mind alive. I don't care where he is or what he costs. Bring him." Hours passed. The panic she refused to show grew colder inside her chest. Then the elevator chimed. Softly. Wrongly softly for a day this deadly. She turned and saw him. The man who walked out looked nothing like the terrified consultant she was used to. Tall. Calm. Deliberate. His shirt sleeves were rolled, his posture relaxed, and his eyes, warm, dark, disarmingly steady, felt like they could read the thoughts she never voiced. And he smiled at her. No fear, no awe, just a quiet, confident smile that unsettled her more than the cyber attack. "You must be Alaine," he said. "Her name!" "Not ma'am, not Ms. Moretti. Alaine." Her jaw tightened. "That's Ms. Moretti." He tilted his head unbothered. "That depends. Are you hiring me to fix your systems or your pride?" The room stopped breathing. No one spoke to her like that. No one dared. And yet, instead of firing him on the spot, she felt something strange flick across her ribs. Heat? Amusement? "No, impossible. Show me what you can do," she said, turning sharply to hide the flicker. He stepped behind her to reach the main console, close enough that she felt the warmth radiating off him, but not close enough to accuse. His presence rattled her more than the flashing red warnings on the screen. He worked quickly, fingers flying, brows knit in quiet concentration. "Your breach isn't random," he said, voice barely above a murmur. "Someone studied your habits, your patterns, someone who knows you." Her breath paused. "Meaning?" "Meaning you're not being robbed," he said. "You're being hunted." That sentence went deeper than he knew. It wasn't just business he was talking about. It was her life. She stepped beside him, too close, and their hands brushed. A soft touch, accidental, barely a graze. But her entire body reacted. She snatched her hand back. "Don't touch me." He didn't look away from the code. His voice dropped, low, steady, far too intimate. "You touched me." Her pulse jumped, and she despised that he could hear it. He typed a final command, system windows snapping open like he had pulled the truth out of hiding. "Whoever's behind this," he said, "will try again tonight." Alaine swallowed. The room suddenly felt too warm. "You can stop them?" He turned to her fully, not as a subordinate, not as a man intimidated by her legacy, as someone who wasn't afraid to stand close enough that she felt her defenses wobble. "I can stop anyone," he said softly. "I just need one thing." She hated how her voice trembled. "What do you need?" His eyes locked into hers, steady, warm, unblinking. "Your trust." Trust. A word she had killed years ago, buried beneath armor and ambition. But something about this man, his calm, his confidence, the way he didn't shrink from her power, made the ground under her shift. Her heart betrayed her first. He unplugged the final corrupted line and restored her system with a clean, commanding sweep of code. The room erupted in relief, experts cheering, phones buzzing, but she barely heard any of it, because Kairo stepped closer again, lowering his voice to a whisper that hit her spine like fire and silk. "Alaine," he said, her name soft and devastating. "You think you don't believe in love? Fine. Believe in control then. Because right now that you're losing it, and I'm the only one who can tell you why." She couldn't breathe. Not from fear of the attack, not from danger. From him. The untouchable woman, untouchable for years, felt something she couldn't name building under her ribs. A pull, a question, a crack. Something she thought she'd buried forever. And for the first time since building her empire, Alaine Moretti felt touched without being touched. Alaine Moretti stood there, pulse unsteady, pretending her lungs still obeyed her. Kairo Reed had stepped into her world, like he owned the ground he walked on, calm, relaxed, irritatingly warm in a place built on cold efficiency. He was the only man alive who could speak to her as if she weren't the billionaire ice queen every headline worshipped and feared. And that alone made him dangerous. She regained enough composure to circle him, slow and sharp like a predator trying to understand why its prey didn't run. "How long have you been studying my systems?" she asked, voice clipped. He didn't even look intimidated. He leaned one hip against her console, as if her headquarters was his living room and he had all day to play. 7 minutes, he said. That gentle confidence again. He didn't brag, didn't perform. He simply stated facts like truths everyone should already know. Her brows lifted despite herself. "You diagnosed a multi-level coordinated breach in 7 minutes?" Kairo shrugged softly, tapping a command into her screen with one finger. "You're asking the wrong question." Alaine stiffened. She did not appreciate riddles, especially not from a man who smiled at her like he could see through her armor. "What is the right question, then?" He met her gaze, steady and warm. "How long did it take for you to realize you don't have to face this alone?" The room fell into a stunned silence. Another pattern interrupt. Another strike at the one place she kept locked, her vulnerability. Elaine's jaw tightened. "No one helps me," she said. "People depend on me. I don't depend on anyone." Kairo's eyes softened. "That sounds exhausting." Exhausting. No one had ever dared describe her life with that word. People called it enviable, powerful, untouchable, legendary. But exhausting? Something inside her chest tightened, as if he'd pressed a thumb on a bruise she didn't know she had. She stepped closer, attempting to reclaim authority. "You think you can just walk in here and psychoanalyze me?" "No," he said. "I walked in here to fix your empire. The rest, that's just what's spilling out of you." The room exhaled. Her heart did not. For a moment, she hated the way he could see her, the way he didn't bow or fear or tremble, the way he spoke to her like she was human, not an empire. She took a slow breath. "Fine. Show me exactly where the breach came from." He turned to the wall-sized display. Lines of code flashed like storm lightning. He traced a glowing red thread with a fingertip. "This," he said quietly, "is the origin point. The attack didn't come from outside. It came from inside. Someone close." Her stomach dropped, an emotion she didn't allow in public. Fear. Not of losing money, but of betrayal. Kairo glanced at her, reading the tension tightening her shoulders. "Don't jump to conclusions," he said gently. "I'll find the truth, that's why you brought me." She hated that he was right. Hated even more how steady she felt when he said it. A moment passed, long enough for her pulse to betray her again. He reached out, not touching her, just brushing her space with his presence. "Alaine." She froze. The way he said her name, a low warmth wrapped in unshakable certainty. No one said her name that way. No one dared. A subtle tremor rippled through her. She masked it with a glare. "You will call me Ms. Moretti," she ordered. Kairo's lips curved, half amusement, half challenge. "No, not if you want the truth. Real trust doesn't start with titles." Her breath caught just once. A spark. Sharp, unwanted. She crushed it instantly. "You're overstepping," she snapped. "And you're scared," he replied softly. The words cut deeper than the sabotage. She inhaled sharply, unsure if she wanted to fire him or get closer just to feel that steady calm again. Before she could respond, her primary monitor blinked violently, red alerts spilling across the screen like wildfire. Kairo stepped behind her, voice suddenly crisp. "They're moving faster. Someone is escalating. Tonight wasn't meant to break your systems." He tapped another command. Another cascade of warnings exploded. "It was meant to break you." The floor under her felt like it shifted. Her empire, her heart, her certainty. Everything tilted, but Kairo stood beside her, unmoving, unshaken, an anchor in the chaos rising around them. He looked at her, eyes calm, voice steady. "You don't have to fall," he said. "Not while I'm here." And something inside her, something she had buried under layers of ice, shivered awake. Not emotion, not desire, something deeper, more dangerous. A question she was terrified to answer. Why does his calm feel like the one thing her chaos has been waiting for? Something shifted the moment Kairo's fingers brushed Elaine's hand. Not a touch, really. Just the faintest, impossible contact. The kind that should mean nothing. But somehow unraveled everything. Alaine felt it like a pulse beneath her skin, quick and disorderly. She withdrew before he could notice, but she knew he already had. Kairo noticed everything. He stood beside her now, studying the encrypted files projected across the dark glass. His shoulder grazed hers whenever he leaned closer to trace digital patterns in the air. He didn't apologize. He didn't move away. He worked with a calm intensity that made her chest tighten in ways she could not control. She tried to breathe evenly, tried to maintain her CEO composure, but the report in front of her ruined that completely. The cyber attack came from inside her empire, not an external threat, not a random hit. Someone she trusted lunged at her from the shadows. Alaine's throat tightened. She had spent years building this empire with precision, with discipline, with ruthless drive. She handpicked every elite member. Every one of them had been tested, sharpened, shaped. So betrayal wasn't just an attack. It was a wound, and Kairo saw it. He tilted his head slightly, studying her, not the files, not the breach, her, as if he could hear the turmoil she tried so hard to swallow, as if her heartbeat was speaking louder than the security alarms. "Alaine," he said quietly, "you're spiraling." She forced a faint scoff. "I don't spiral. You do," he answered, with a voice soft enough to anchor her, yet firm enough to challenge her. Just not in front of anyone else. Her pulse stumbled. Kairo had always been brilliant, dangerous, controlled, but he had never been this close. Never this warm, never this tuned into her breathing the way he was now. She stepped back instinctively, needing space. He stepped forward without meaning to, closing the same distance she tried to create. It felt like a breach of its own, a quiet one, unseen, unplanned, unstoppable. "Someone on your inner board accessed these firewalls," he murmured, eyes scanning the code. "They used familiarity against you. That means they know your patterns, your routines. They know exactly where you're strong and where you're human." Her breath hitched at that last word. Human. She'd cut that part of herself out years ago. She'd buried softness, sentiment, vulnerability beneath ambition and duty. But right now, with Kairo standing too close, reading her too deeply, she felt every layer unravel. "Tell me who you suspect," he added. Her voice faltered. "I don't want to accuse the wrong person." "No," he said gently. "You don't want to hurt someone you once called family." The truth stung. Alaine looked anywhere but at him. At the glowing screens, the city lights below, the ghost of trust she felt slipping between her fingers. Kairo's hand hovered near hers again, as if he wanted to steady her but didn't dare. This time she didn't move. This time, she let the air between them vibrate with everything unspoken. And in that silence she knew two things with frightening clarity. Her empire had been breached, but so had her heart. Alaine wasn't sure which one terrified her more. The confession she never voiced still lingered in the air. Her empire had been breached, and so had her heart. But the universe didn't even give Alaine a moment to process it, because at 9:12 p.m. the world went black. First the humming glass walls dimmed, then the digital grids flickered, then silence, a heavy, unnatural silence that swallowed everything. Her headquarters, her fortress, fell into darkness. Alaine stiffened. This isn't possible. Our power grid is isolated." Kairo didn't hesitate. One step, and he was in front of her. Another, and his hand found her elbow, steady and certain in the dark. "Alaine," he murmured, voice low, controlled, protective in a way that rattled her composure. "Stay close to me." Emergency lights buzzed awake, flooding the office in warm gold. It was dim, almost intimate, too intimate for the storm rising in her chest. He stood taller in the glow, shadows crossing his jaw, his eyes sharper than the darkness around them. Her employees shouted down the hall, confusion echoing through floors that were supposed to be untouchable. But Kairo didn't look away from her. "This blackout wasn't random," he said quietly. "Someone wanted you vulnerable." Alaine's breath trembled. She never trembled. The emergency lights flickered again, and instinct pulled her closer. To stability, to warmth, to the one person who always stayed steady, even when she didn't want him to. Her shoulder brushed his chest. She should have stepped back. She didn't. Kairo lowered his head a fraction, just enough that his breath warmed her temple. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said. Not as an employee, not as her chief strategist. As something more. Her heart reacted before her mind could shut it down. It rose, fierce and frightened, pressing against the ribs she used as armor. She hated that feeling. She hated that it came so easily with him. "Don't look at me like that," she whispered. "Like what?" His voice was quieter now, almost tender. "Like I need saving." "Alaine," he said, "for once you do." Her knees weakened at the admission she didn't make. Her empire was wobbling. Her control was cracking. Someone in her inner circle had turned on her, and without meaning to, she leaned into him. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough that he felt it. Enough that the gold light caught the truth between them. Kairo's hand slid to the small of her back, not possessive, not bold, just a shield, a silent promise. "You don't have to walk through this alone," he murmured. Her lips parted, but the words refused to come, because she didn't want to rely on anyone. She didn't want to feel cared for. Yet here she was, letting his presence steady her, letting his warmth anchor her, letting herself be human in the one moment she should have been steel. She hated it, but she didn't walk away. Not this time. The power didn't come back with a roar. It returned in a slow pulse. First the ceiling lights, then the screens, then the humming heart of her empire stitching itself back together. But Alaine didn't feel relief. Not when Kairo was still standing so close she could feel his warmth against the tension in her spine. He slid his hand away, slow, controlled, like he knew she'd snap if he moved too quickly. But the ghost of his touch stayed. She hated that. Kairo turned to the nearest console, fingers dancing over keys. The light from the screens painted his face blue, sharp, focused. Too focused. He wasn't just restoring the system, he was digging. "You're unusually quiet," he commented lightly, not looking up. "Is this your calm after chaos mode?" Her jaw tightened. "I don't have modes, I have standards." He smiled, that soft, knowing smile that unraveled something deep in her chest. "Of course you do," he murmured. "But right now you're shaken." No one had said that to her in a decade. No one dared. Alaine swallowed hard. "Just fix it." "I am fixing it." He tapped one last command and the building hummed back to full strength. But then he froze. She felt the shift, sharp, dangerous. The air changed. "Alaine!" His voice dropped. This wasn't just a blackout. Someone rerouted funds while the system was down. Her stomach tightened. "How much?" He turned the screen toward her. The numbers hit like a hit to the ribs. Her empire wasn't just damaged, it was bleeding. "Kairo." She whispered it before she caught herself. "Who did this?" He leaned back, crossing his arms, eyes flicking to hers with unsettling calm. "Someone who knows your infrastructure better than your board does." Her breath caught. Someone inside. Someone trusted. He stepped closer, too close, his voice dropping to that tone that always slipped past her defenses. "We'll find them, but you need to breathe." "I am breathing," she snapped. He raised a brow. "That's debatable." She glared. "Don't tease me." "I'm not teasing, I'm observing." His smile returned, slow, warm, devastating. She felt heat climb her neck. The worst part, her employees saw it. They were pretending not to look, but the whispers were already forming in the corners of the room. They'd never seen her this way. The Iron Queen turning human. Not for the board. Not for the world. For him. Alaine straightened her shoulders, trying to reclaim her steel. But her voice came out softer than she intended. "Just tell me what we do next." Kairo's gaze held hers, steady, grounding, unshakable. "Next," he murmured. "We hunt the traitor." Something dangerous, electric, alive sparked between them. "And Alaine?" He leaned just a little closer, his breath brushing her cheek. "I'm not letting you fall. Not in business. Not in anything." Her pulse tripped. She told herself to step away. She didn't. She stood there, letting a man she barely knew steady her in a way no one ever had. And everyone watching knew something had changed. Alaine didn't remember walking into her private conference room. All she knew was that the moment the glass door slid shut behind them, the world outside dimmed. Voices, whispers, judgment fading into a distant blur. Only Kairo remained. Kairo, with that quiet, grounding presence that made her feel seen in ways she had spent years avoiding. He leaned against the table, arms folded, watching her with a patience she wasn't used to. Not the fear-driven patience of employees waiting for orders. Something gentler, something dangerous. "Talk to me," he said softly. She almost laughed. A cold, brittle sound that never made it past her throat. "I don't talk," she murmured. "I command." "Not with me." The simplicity of those 3 words cracked something. Just a hairline fracture, but she felt it. Her fingers curled against the glass edge of the table. Her breath hitched just enough to betray her. "Kairo." It was the way she said his name, unshielded, unarmored, that made him straighten. She didn't look at him when she spoke. Looking would make it too real. "Everyone wants my empire," she said, her voice barely holding. "My power, my name, my access." A pause, a breath, a confession dragging itself out of her like a truth she'd buried too deep. "But nobody wants me." Kairo didn't interrupt, didn't shift, didn't pity. He simply listened, fully, fiercely, like she was saying something sacred. She swallowed hard. They love what I build. They fear what I protect, but me? Her voice wavered. Anyone who gets close either tries to use me or break me. Silence, heavy, trembling, intimate. Then Kairo moved. Slowly, deliberately. Like approaching a wounded creature he refused to scare away. He stopped just in front of her, leaving only a breath of space. Enough for comfort, enough for tension. "Alaine," he said, voice deep, calm, unshakably steady. "You're not hard to love, you're hard to reach." Her chest tightened. His next words were softer, too soft. "And you built your empire so high, you forgot how to let anyone climb it." That hit, right where she didn't want it to. Her breath shuddered. Her lashes trembled. She hated that he noticed. He always noticed. "You think this is easy for me?" she whispered. "Letting someone this close?" His eyes softened, warm gold melting into something deeper. "I know it costs you," he murmured. "But you're not alone in this, not anymore." Her throat tightened. "I don't know how to trust that." "You don't have to know." He reached out, not to grab, not to claim, just to tilt her chin gently, urging her to meet his gaze. "You just have to let me stay." Her pulse stuttered. Her breath caught. For a moment, just one, she felt safe enough to exhale. And that terrified her more than anything. Because the battlefield wasn't the sabotage. It wasn't the traitor. It wasn't the collapse of her empire. The real battlefield was vulnerability. Her vulnerability, and Kairo was standing in the center of it. Not as her employee, not as her tech savior, as the first man who'd ever listened not to her power, but to her heart. Alaine Moretti had spent her life in control. Every boardroom, every empire, every single move executed with precision. She thrived on power. She demanded obedience. And yet here she was standing in front of Kairo Reed, utterly unmoored. He had just solved the largest piece of the sabotage puzzle, the one that would expose the traitor hiding in her empire. But he wasn't telling her yet. "I'll confirm it first," he said calmly, voice low and unwavering. "Then you'll know." She blinked again, and hated herself for the way her chest constricted. "You can't," she started, but he cut her off with a single look. "You can't what?" His voice was smooth, teasing, almost dangerous in its patience. "You can't control everything, not even me." The words were simple, innocuous almost, but in the quiet hum of her office with city lights flickering outside, they landed like explosives. Elaine's lips pressed into a thin line. Control, she always needed it, always. And he had just taken some, gently, deliberately, without asking. Her gaze fell to his mouth. The slow curve of his smile this time, it wasn't amused. Not playful, not teasing. Personal, targeted, private. She couldn't breathe. He stepped closer, and the space between them shrank by inches that her mind screamed she should guard. Her body secretly craved. "You're thinking too much," he murmured, almost to himself. Or maybe to her. She couldn't tell. And she hated not being able to tell. "Stop smiling at me like that," she said, voice sharp, but it trembled just slightly. Her own heart betrayed her in that tremor. "I can't," he replied. "Because you're here, and because you're breaking my focus." Her pulse hit a rhythm she didn't recognize. She had been untouchable, unshakable, unfeeling, or so she told herself. And yet here, in the quiet glow of emergency lights and city reflection, she felt fragile, exposed, human. Her mind screamed to retreat, to regain control, to be the queen. But her body refused. It leaned in, unconsciously, just to feel the warmth of him close. "You're dangerous," she whispered almost to herself. "Not because you can hurt me. Because you see me and I—" She stopped. Couldn't finish. Didn't want to. He tilted his head, studying her like he could read every thought she tried to hide. "Good," he said softly. "Because I'm not going anywhere." The words should have been enough. They should have made her pull back. They should have reminded her why she guarded herself so fiercely. But instead, she let the tremor in her chest grow. Let the warmth in her palms spread. Let the pull toward him deepen. She was supposed to be untouchable. Untouchable in body, mind, heart, empire. But in the shadow of Kairo's calm, in the curve of that smile, she realized for the first time in years that being untouchable wasn't enough. Not when he could reach her anyway. And for the first time, she didn't try to stop him. Alaine Moretti's heels clicked against polished marble as she made her way through the quiet hallways of the top floor. Every echo reminded her of the walls she had spent years building around herself. Walls of control, of power, of unshakable composure. And yet tonight they were crumbling. She arrived at Kairo's suite, her heart a drum she couldn't silence. Every thought screamed caution, every instinct urged retreat, but the need was louder. The need to forget the Empire for just a few moments. To forget the betrayal, the sabotage, the relentless pressure. To forget herself. She knocked lightly. He opened the door, calm, poised, the soft lamplight catching the sharp lines of his face. Even his eyes, warm and steady, seemed to see her too clearly. She started, then faltered. The words she had rehearsed, "I need a distraction," left her lips half-formed, fragile. He didn't answer. He didn't judge. He simply studied her. The flicker of desperation she tried to mask, the tremor in her voice, the way her fingers curled around her own wrist like a shield. "You don't need to say it," he said softly. "Not to me." Her chest tightened. The pull she had resisted for weeks, ever since he had begun unearthing the cracks in her empire, the cracks in her heart, pulled harder. "I just need a moment," she whispered. "A break from everything." He stepped closer. Their faces inched toward each other, the space charged, electric, intimate. She leaned in without thinking, eyes half-lidded, heart hammering, daring him to meet her. And he stopped, a fraction of an inch away, so close she could feel the warmth of his breath, the steady pulse at his throat. "Not like this," he murmured. Gentle, firm, absolute. The denial hit her harder than anything else ever could. The denial was a hand on her chest, a reminder that he wasn't hers to command. That desire alone didn't give her control, that she couldn't force the pull she felt into action, no matter how much her body screamed for it. Her lips parted, a shiver crawling up her spine. Her eyes searched his for something, permission, leniency, a crack in the calm, but found only clarity. He was steady, controlled. A mirror of the restraint she had so long denied herself. And in that moment, the reality was undeniable. Her walls weren't just falling. They had already collapsed. She had slipped. Not into recklessness, not fully, but into the one vulnerability she had never allowed herself to touch. Him. Her pulse raced. Her thoughts spun. And her empire, her carefully measured control, felt utterly distant, irrelevant, like smoke curling from a fire she could no longer contain. All she could do was breathe and remember his words. Not like this. Haunting, unyielding, intoxicating. The denial lingered in her chest, deep and impossible to shake. And yet, she couldn't walk away. The city outside glimmered like a field of distant stars. But inside Kairo's suite, Alaine Moretti was the only star she allowed herself to be. She returned that night, not hiding, not excusing, not shielding herself behind steel or empire. For once there was no armor, no posture, just her, vulnerable, trembling, and dangerous in the way only truth could make her. Kairo looked up from the console, eyes catching hers with that calm, piercing intensity she had come to both dread and crave. He didn't ask questions, he didn't move, he waited. And she finally let herself speak. "I want you," she admitted, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Just for one night." The words left her lips with the weight of everything she'd suppressed for years. The control, the fear, the isolation. They weren't just a request. They were a confession, a surrender, a crack in the empire walls she had spent decades building. Kairo's chest rose slowly. His jaw tightened just slightly as he processed the gravity of her honesty. She saw something in his eyes she hadn't anticipated. Not judgment, not surprise, but impact. It hit him harder than the request itself. Harder than the betrayal. Harder than the sabotage. Harder than anything he had faced beside her empire. Because it was real. It was raw. It was Alaine Moretti, stripped of her defenses. He leaned forward just a fraction, keeping the space intimate, the moment sacred. "I'll agree," he said quietly, voice steady, deliberate, leaving no room for doubt. Her pulse skipped, relief and danger mingled. But he held up a single finger, a condition, clear, unwavering. "No running after," he added. "Not tomorrow, not next week, just tonight and nothing else." Elaine's breath caught, not because of denial, not because of rejection, because the truth in those words carried weight. Freedom within restraint, surrender within trust. It was everything she had feared and craved at the same time. For the first time in years, she let herself step closer without command. Closer to him, closer to warmth, closer to vulnerability. And in that move, small, deliberate, intimate, she knew the empire didn't matter here. The power didn't matter. The city, the betrayal, the sabotage, they all faded in the gravity of this one night. Kairo watched her, calm, unwavering, steady as a lighthouse in the storm of her emotions. And for the first time, she didn't try to hide the tremor in her pulse, the heat rising through her chest, the longing she had denied herself. Because tonight, honesty ruled. Tonight, walls didn't matter. Tonight, she was not a queen. She was just Alaine. And he was the first man who had ever made her feel safe in that surrender. The night was theirs. Unspoken rules, deliberate touches, the electricity of restraint and desire dancing between them. Alaine knew with frightening clarity that nothing would ever be the same again. The night wrapped around them like velvet, thick and private. A cocoon outside the city's relentless pulse. Alaine Moretti, the woman who had controlled every corner of her world, every boardroom, every empire, every single decision, felt herself unspooling. Kairo stood near her, calm and steady, his presence a force she couldn't fight. Every nerve in her body hummed in response to him, to his quiet strength, to the subtle brush of his hand against hers. She tried to hold on to composure, tried to remind herself of titles, walls, and rules. But they all melted as he guided her. Not with force, but with certainty, with the kind of steadiness that made surrender irresistible. Her breath hitched. Her pulse raced. Her fingers trembled in a way she hadn't allowed herself in years. She started, but the words caught in her throat. Kairo didn't move too quickly. Didn't let her panic or doubt interrupt the rhythm he set. He held her, steady, grounding, his eyes locking hers with a weight that demanded trust. Her voice fell to a whisper almost inaudible. Mercy. It wasn't fear, it wasn't weakness. It was release. Release she had buried under steel and ambition. And he held her, not letting go, not rushing, letting the closeness build in quiet, deliberate waves. The air between them vibrated, a subtle electricity that made the room shrink until it felt like the only space that mattered was this one heartbeat, this one shared breath. Alaine thought it would end there, that the storm of tension and desire had peaked, that she would regain control in the morning, retreat behind her empire, her armor, her routine. But her heart refused. Even after the room quieted, even after the pulse of the city returned beyond the glass walls, her chest still raced. Her thoughts still lingered on him. The man who had seen her bare, who had held her steady, who had ignited a fire she didn't know she still had. And she realized in that quiet aftermath that control was no longer hers to claim, because desire, honesty, and vulnerability had slipped past every defense she had ever built. And Kairo had touched something she didn't even know existed in herself. The night might have ended, but for the first time in years she knew it wasn't over. Not for her, not for him, not for the pull that neither could deny. Her empire could wait. Her walls could wait. Even her carefully measured composure could wait. Because some things, like her heart, like desire, like truth, demanded to be felt. And tonight she had finally let herself feel. Sunrise spilled gold across the city, cutting through the glass walls of Alaine Moretti's private office. It should have felt like clarity. It should have felt like control. But instead it was unbearable. She avoided him. Every glance, every shared hallway, every hover of his presence felt like a reminder of the night she had let herself feel, let herself be human, let herself trust, let herself want. Kairo noticed. Of course he noticed. He always noticed. Always understood. Always read her like she was a line of code. Careful, intricate, precise. And he had already cracked the vulnerabilities she didn't even know existed. "I've found the final piece," he said, calm, measured, but with an intensity that made her chest tighten. She flinched but didn't look up. He didn't need her gaze to know she was bracing. "The sabotage isn't random," he continued. "It's internal. Someone in your inner circle wants your empire destroyed. They've been waiting for the perfect moment." Alaine's pulse spiked. Her world, her life, her power, everything she had built was under threat from the people she trusted most. People she had handpicked, groomed, tested. People she had considered untouchable. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Who?" she whispered. The word felt too loud in the quiet morning, even as the city beyond the glass continued its relentless rise. Kairo's eyes didn't waver. "I'm not certain yet, but the clues point to someone close. Someone who knows your patterns, your routines, your weaknesses." Weaknesses. He said it like it was a fact, not a taunt. But her heart lurched anyway. She wanted to look at him, to demand reassurance, to demand that this one truth wouldn't ruin what had begun between them. But she couldn't. Not yet. He stepped closer, the warmth of him invading the space she had hoped to reclaim. "Alaine," he said softly, voice low enough that only she could hear. "I need you focused, but I also need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She swallowed hard. Focus, trust, two things she rarely allowed. Two things she had never given so willingly. "I will," she admitted, though her voice barely carried conviction. Kairo's gaze softened, not pitying, not judging, simply steady, anchored. "Good, because this isn't just about protecting your empire, it's about protecting you." Her chest tightened at that simple, devastating truth. It wasn't just her business under attack. It was her heart, her trust, her sense of control. And for the first time since the night she had let herself feel, she realized the real battle wasn't just for the empire. It was for the fragile, terrifying, exhilarating pull she couldn't deny. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. But she felt him closer than ever. And in that moment, stakes weren't just sky high. They were personal. Because the enemy wasn't just in the boardroom. It was in the shadows of everything she thought she could control. And the man who had seen her heart, Kairo, was the only one who could help her fight it. The first headlines hit before her morning coffee could cool. Her name, Alaine Moretti, splashed across the city in scandalous, damaging letters. Billionaire CEO in secret affair with tech consultant. Power, money, and now desire. Is Alaine Moretti losing control? The world she had built, meticulously for decades, trembled under the weight of public opinion. Boardrooms whispered. Investors hesitated. The empire she controlled like clockwork now threatened to crumble. And yet through the chaos, Kairo was there, not hiding, not flinching, not distancing himself to protect her reputation. He stood beside her, calm, grounded, unshakable, a rock in a storm she had always faced alone. She felt a strange mix of awe and frustration. How could he be so steady when everything she built was unraveling? How could he not see this as dangerous? "Your rival," he said quietly, letting the words slice through the murmurs and panic, "knew exactly how to hit you where it hurts. They leaked this. Intentionally." Her chest tightened. It wasn't just about the empire anymore. It wasn't just about money, control, or status. It was personal. Her vulnerabilities, her heart, her trust, her night with him, were weaponized. Alaine bristled, straightened her shoulders, trying to reclaim composure. "You can't fix this," she said, voice sharp but trembling slightly. "I've been flawless for years. No one touches me, not like this." Kairo didn't argue. He didn't flinch at her anger or the weight of the headlines. He simply leaned a fraction closer, letting his presence speak louder than words. "You don't have to be flawless," he said. "You just have to survive, and I'll make sure you do." Her pulse faltered. Survive, not alone. She glanced at him, finally meeting his gaze. And in that look she saw everything. Certainty, loyalty, something fierce and untouchable that no scandal could erase. Her vulnerability flared, but so did a strange sense of relief. The world was crumbling, yes, but he didn't waver. The culprit had struck, and her empire shook. But for the first time in years, she realized she didn't have to face this alone. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was a kind of strength in letting someone stand beside her. Not in front, not behind, but with her. Her empire might be under attack. Her reputation might be on the line. But Kairo was hers to trust. And in that truth, she found something she hadn't allowed herself in years: hope. The room was silent, too silent. Even the city beyond her glass walls seemed to hold its breath. Alaine Moretti had faced sabotage before, betrayal in business before, rivals who wanted her down. But this was different. Her CFO, the man she had personally mentored, watched grow from nothing into someone she trusted above all others. The man she had shared victories, strategies, late nights, and laughter with. He didn't flinch as he confessed. His voice was steady, almost proud. "I wanted your empire, Alaine," he said, eyes unwavering. "To teach you what loneliness feels like." Her chest felt like it had been ripped open. Not because of the empire, not because of money or status or even power, but because the person she had trusted most had used that trust like a weapon. The betrayal was sharp. It pierced deeper than any headline, any boardroom sabotage, any public humiliation. Her knees gave way before she even realized it. The world spun around her, chaos echoing in her ears. The city lights outside blurring into streaks of gold and crimson. And then, steady, unshakable, Kairo was there. His hands caught her before she hit the floor. Strong, gentle, deliberate, anchoring her when everything else seemed to crumble. "Breathe," he murmured, holding her close enough that she could feel the warmth of his chest against hers. "Breathe, Alaine, you're not alone." Her body trembled, but not just from grief, from relief, from the undeniable pull she had tried to ignore, from the realization that amidst betrayal, there was at least one thing she could still trust. Kairo's presence was a lifeline, not to the empire, not to the boardroom, not to the titles or wealth, but to her, to her heart, her fear, her fragility. Alaine pressed her forehead to his chest, letting herself sink into him, into the safety he offered without words. She hated feeling this exposed, hated that the betrayal had broken her walls, hated how easily he could hold her steady, and yet she didn't pull away, because in that moment nothing else mattered. Not the empire, not the headlines, not the betrayal. Only him, only the quiet certainty of his hands around her, the calm steadiness of his presence, the unspoken promise that she would not face this alone. Her heart was raw, vulnerable, and for the first time in a long time she allowed herself to feel. And Kairo allowed her to lean into it. Alaine Moretti walked through her office with the precision and authority she had spent decades mastering. Every corner, every boardroom, every digital pulse of her empire reflected the woman she had always been. Fierce, unflinching, untouchable. But this time it felt different. The sabotage had been traced, the traitor exposed, the damage repaired, power restored, reputation untarnished. Yet something lingered, an ache, subtle and insistent, that no empire or victory could fill. Kairo stood at the edge of the room, watching her with that calm certainty that had become both her anchor and her temptation. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone reminded her of the night she had let herself feel, the moment she had surrendered control, and the truth she had spent years denying. Her pulse quickened. Her mind, usually a fortress of logic and strategy, betrayed her. She realized something bigger than power, bigger than money, bigger than every achievement she had clawed for. She didn't want her world if he wasn't in it. The realization hit her like a jolt of electricity, frightening, thrilling, unavoidable. She drew in a steadying breath and took a step toward him. She began, voice low, deliberate. I've spent my life running my empire, controlling every detail, every outcome. I've never let anyone in. Kairo's eyes softened. He didn't interrupt. He just waited, patient, grounded, steady. But Her chest rose, heart pounding. I don't want it all, if you're not part of it. The words were terrifying, raw, unforgivingly honest, a confession of trust, of need, of desire disguised as inevitability. Kairo stepped closer, closing the space she had once tried to protect with walls and distance. You don't have to run from it, he said quietly. You don't have to fight it alone. Her hands trembled as they hovered near his chest, instinctively drawn to the warmth she had denied herself for so long. Her fear of love, the fear that had kept her untouchable, untamed, unreachable, stood before her, demanding confrontation. And for the first time she didn't resist. She faced it, accepted it, invited it in, with all the courage she had reserved for boardrooms and empires. Kairo's lips curved into that slow, devastating smile, the one that had unraveled her without a single touch, and now, without a single word, promised her something she had never thought she could have. Safety in surrender, and power in vulnerability. Alaine realized then that fighting back wasn't about reclaiming her empire. It was about reclaiming herself, and for the first time she understood. Letting herself love, letting herself need him was the greatest victory of all. The empire could survive any threat. The world could whisper, judge, or conspire. But this moment, this choice, this heart was hers. And Kairo was finally hers too. The city lights shimmered through the glass walls of Alaine Moretti's office, reflecting in patterns that felt almost like fire on water. It should have been a world of chaos. Boardrooms buzzing, empires shifting, betrayals remembered. But in that moment, none of it mattered. She stood across from Kairo, heart exposed, pulse raw. Emotions she had spent years locking behind steel walls, now unguarded. The man who had arrived as a problem solver, a tech consultant, had become so much more. He had unraveled her defenses without permission. He had seen her vulnerability and held it sacred. He had reminded her what it felt like to be human and to be loved. Alaine took a step forward, closing the last fraction of distance between them. She didn't hesitate. She didn't second guess. She didn't fight the pull she had denied for so long. Kairo, she whispered, voice trembling yet steady in its honesty. I didn't believe in love. His eyes softened, gold and unwavering. She felt his hand brush hers, deliberate, grounding, anchoring, until your touch made me question everything. The words fell like petals, fragile yet unstoppable, landing in the quiet space between them. It wasn't a declaration of the empire, the money, or the titles she had built. It was a declaration of trust, surrender, and desire, of her heart, her choice, her truth. Kairo's smile widened, slow, personal, devastating. I choose you, he said, low, deliberate, certain. Not the empire, not the chaos, you. The final walls crumbled, not with force, not with struggle, but with the certainty that she no longer needed to fight alone. The woman who had commanded the world, who had been untouchable, who had trusted only herself, now stood exposed and whole. Alaine let herself melt into that certainty. Her fears, her control, her doubts, all dissipated in the warmth of a man who had seen her completely. And in that moment she understood. Power without love was hollow. Control without connection was empty. But trust, vulnerability, and a heart fully open, those were the empires worth building. The city could watch, the world could whisper, but it no longer mattered, because she believed again. And this time, it wasn't just a fleeting spark. It was real. Because of him. Because of Kairo. Because of the touch that had awakened her heart, shattered her walls, and let her finally be free. And for the first time in a lifetime, Alaine Moretti smiled without armor. Completely, utterly, and without fear. She was in love, and she would never doubt it again. Don't let this heart-stopping romance end here. Subscribe now and follow Alaine and Kairo's journey through betrayal, desire, and the power of love. Hit the bell so you never miss a twist, a spark, or the next chapter of a story that will make your heart race. Comment below. What would you do if the one person you trusted broke your world, but also held the key to your heart?